I'm keen to understand how the integration of ethical principles is done within a software architecture. It's one thing to approach the subject from a governance perspective, and we all know that, right? But when you wear your programming hat, the challenge remains how all of these gets embedded into the software development lifecycle. So this person is asking the panelists to share specific use cases from their first-hand experience. He's looking at specific use case from an engineering perspective, because we see two different perspectives here. It's easy to talk about governance perspective, but what about an engineering perspective? Chuan or David, would you like to take on this question?
I'll give Chuan time to think for a moment. I can share thinking about the bad situations. In the engineering pipeline, the engineers think very concretely. They don't think philosophically. But I think it's possible to map some of the sort of red flags that you might think of in an ethical framework if you come from a sort of a privacy perspective into concrete things that can serve as trigger points. So for example, when you join two tables at the technical level, that means you're cross-referencing data, possibly from two domains, connecting the dots about someone or something. That's a formal act that an engineer can understand. At the most technical sort of SQL level, it's a table join. But it's a red flag that can be embedded into an engineering process without turning the engineers into ethicists and philosophers. When you're doing a join, you're cross-referencing. At that moment, someone can be triggered that some engineers cross-referencing data where the matching of the fields is a citizen ID number or something like that. We're cross-referencing what we know about you from there because we purchased some data from your credit card company. As soon as there's cross-referencing, I use that as an example of something that an engineer can be embedded into an engineering pipe sort of a process, because it's a formal act, a join. It could trigger the involvement of someone who's a DPO or someone who has that responsibility. I can give examples that are very horrible examples of times when companies have cross-referenced data to come to horrible results, but I'd rather not. But I just mean it as an example. It is possible to bring it down to earth, embedded into the engineering process, but I really have not seen that done. That needs to be done. I accept that. So the premise of the question is that needs to get done. It needs to be embedded into the day-to-day engineering without the engineers having to take a course in ethics. I agree. I love the premise of that question. I agree with it. I've heard it from a lot of smart people. I've never seen it done in engineering.
Yeah, in the personal data field, we got something called data protection by design, right? So you don't expect engineers to know the data protection principles, right? So thanks for bringing that up.
I think that is an excellent question. I don't know whether David or Chuan would agree with me, but I'm beginning to see that they are actually platform developers who are trying to build AI ethics into their platform so that as you develop on their platform, certain aspects of ethics, for example, data integrity, provenance, lineage, or even testing for bias are actually built into the platform. There are actually quite a number of them around. So I don't know whether that helps with the first question.
Excellent.
Kevin, can I just build on Sang Hao's case here? Actually, we are in the process of building a sales coaching AI system. When we were conceiving this idea, we actually thought of what should an ethical salesperson be like. When you think about this in terms of its outcome, you can reverse engineer the data set that you need to build to train, the data set that you need to test. You can test these biases in the data. You see how the AI reacts to these data sets. So so if you want to bake it in, then you can have hard logic. Actually, ethics is a pretty simple implementation from my perspective. It's a yes or no, right? It's a right or wrong. Either you do it or you don't do it. So if you run this data sets testing, you can actually detect, preempt, or at least anticipate some of these unethical outcomes.
For more data protection resources, visit www.dpaxnetwork.org, the Data Protection Excellence Network, and sign up for free as a member to have full access to all content. Do also like and follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn if you found this useful.